Have you ever heard the saying that when you work for yourself, work never stops? I feel like this is something that's so common in the entrepreneurial space, is that hustle culture, that grind. I think a lot of people can get sucked down the rabbit hole of putting in more hours for their own business than they ever would have for a corporation. For example, working later into the night, working on weekends, taking less vacations because you're in the interest of growing something for yourself. And I think one thing that we've learned with our business is it's important to not only prioritize the business, focus on growth. But if you're not focusing on yourself and remembering your why of why you're working so hard in the first place, it's easy to lose sight of your ultimate goals. So today we're going to be talking about how you can grow a business, put money in your bank account, and also achieve your life goals and your family goals. We're going to be talking about how to take a maternity leave as an entrepreneur and how to take extended time off without sacrificing revenue for your business or stability for your family's income.
Having just had a baby, we had to go through figuring out how to set up a maternity leave for me for the first time. We had to figure out how to do it, how it would work, and what would be most beneficial for me and our whole team. It was a lot to figure out. And honestly, like the transition with work was one of the hardest parts of having a baby, but it was also one of the most rewarding things. Being able to have a baby and take 3 months off and be with my family and be so present with them while knowing that my business was still running and I was still able to receive a paycheck on the first of each month. Like that is what I've worked all of the past 6 years of my life to get to. And it was a really full circle moment to be able to do all of that. And today we're going to dive into how to set that up, what it looks like from a logistical perspective, and how you can plan whether you work for yourself or you work for a corporate job, how you can make the most out of these like big milestone moments in your life.
Welcome to Monday through Sunday. I'm Logan.
I'm Sanam.
And I'm Lane. We're best friends, the founders of Blossom Brands, and the hosts of this podcast.
We can't wait to take you behind the scenes of running a 7-figure agency with our best friends.
We're sharing our mistakes, our lessons learned, and giving you tactical advice to build the career, the business, and the relationships you dream of, and a life you don't need a weekend to escape from.
So let's get balanced and let's get down to business. Welcome to the show. I think what is really unique about the situation that I was in, like when I was like, okay, I am ready to start a family, I'm ready to, have kids, was like, if you work in a corporate company for a corporate job, you have a system that's set up for you to do that. Like not all companies, because that's not like a federal law that it should be, but not most companies have a maternity leave. They have a policy, like, okay, well, when I get pregnant, I need to tell my manager this amount of time in advance. I'm going to get this many weeks. If I want more, I can maybe use some of my PTO. Like there's a system and you follow the system. For me, I was kind of like, all right, I need to build a system. Like no one's ever had a baby here. I don't know what I should do. And I did figure out a plan for myself and I figured out what would work for me. I also had to talk to you guys and figure out what's going to work for my team, what's going to work for my business partners. How are we all going to create something that we feel good about? So honestly, I would say that this planning started so long ago, because I would even go back to say that when we first decided or talked about bringing on a third partner and bringing you into the mix, it was a lot of what was on my mind is I wasn't even married yet then, but I was I want to be able to take a honeymoon. I want to be able to take time off, and I want to be able to potentially family plan one day and, be able to leave and not feel like I'm leaving something that can't run without me. Mm-hmm. And I think that was a really big decision in why I felt like it was the best number for us to have 3 partners in our business, is because if one of us leaves, there's still 2 of us, everybody still has someone to lean on. Mm-hmm. And I think for us being young women that want to focus on our personal lives, be able to grow families, it is really important if we want to keep working to be able to create a sustainable system that we can do that in, and where we can kind of figure out even post baby, what does our work schedule look like? How many hours do I need to be home versus being working, and how can I make it all work? And we have the ability to do that, not only because we work for ourselves, but because we've strategically set our business up in a way where yes, maybe like if it was just me on my own, if it was just two of us, if it like we would have a bigger piece of the pie, but we wouldn't be happy because we wouldn't be able to have like the balance that we've created. So I think like in thinking about like the structure of our team, like it goes back to like how, you know, we all function and how that was planned. Like I'd say that this planning started like almost that long ago, which is kind of crazy.
No, it's actually the most lame thing I've ever heard. It's actually not crazy at all.
Yes, that's how my planning brain works. But if we think more like, okay, just this year, like when I really like actually was thinking about getting pregnant and when I was actually pregnant and thinking about like how I wanted first to take my maternity leave, I just in my head was like, I want to take 3 months. And I was like, is that going to be okay? Is everybody okay with that?
And is that the normal amount of time? Like, I don't even have a reference.
So I would say that that's probably like average. Some companies, I think like only have like 8 weeks. I think that's like the lower end of the 6 to 8 weeks is probably like the lowest.
The lower normal.
But yeah, but some companies now have like 5 months, 6 months, like 8 months. Like it really, there's a really large variation between what companies offer. There's no like standard. There's not a federal mandate. Like, you know, companies don't have to give it. It's really just like a benefit that people offer because they should.
Right.
But anyways, I was like, all right, 3 months sounds good. And of course, like Sanam and Logan being like the great business partners that they are, like, are you sure? Is that enough? Do you need more? And like, I first feel very, very blessed and lucky to have people in my life that are like, not like, oh, how are we going to do that? You know, and you guys actually wanted that for me, which like is the best feeling and situation you can really be in, is to like be supported during those big moments. But so like in planning, in figuring out like how's this going to work? I started, I'd say like 3 months ahead of time. I was like, all right, it's time to start prepping. If I was no longer here, if I was no longer doing my job, like how would this work? And I think the first thing that I did, and I'd say that like this is not even just for if you own your own business, but I think something that anyone can do if they're about to go on maternity leave or like take a really long out of office PTO, is ask people like what they need. Talk to your clients, talk to your employees, and ask them like, is there anything when I'm gone that could make the transition a little bit like more seamless? So I'd say first start there. Like you can kind of plan for yourself, but like it's always best to give other people the opportunity to say, you know, what they need and not just assume.
I think that's a really good point, because just from a relationship perspective, like I feel like I remember you asking me this and I was like, I don't know, like it's going to be fine. But I think just taking the extra step to ask me like really shows like that consideration.
Yeah.
And then when the time came, I was happy to like pull a little bit more weight because I really felt valued in the transaction. It wasn't just like a FYI, I'm doing this. It was like a two-way street.
Yeah. And I think that was like a big thing, is like making it, everything was like a group decision. I wasn't like, this is going to happen, this is how it's going to be. It was like, all right, like what's going to work for everybody. I'm not going to put anything on anyone that they don't feel comfortable or confident with doing. So I think like from there, it was like, all right, like let's make a list of everything that I do. Like what are my main responsibilities? Like what do I do that no one else does? So for me, like some of those areas are first, like the clients that I lead. Obviously, that's like the biggest part of my job is leading our clients, leading strategy for the accounts that I work on. So that's obviously a huge part. But I also manage a lot of like internal team development. I structure kind of like our schedules and how everybody works with each other, and do some like reviews for people. So like I do hold a lot of like the team structure together. And so I was like, okay, that's something that I know that I only do. And I do a lot of billing and invoicing and accounting type of things. So I was like, okay, like these are kind of the main areas. And first it's like, okay, what can I get ahead on that I don't have to put anyone else like in charge of? And so for me, like that was when I was like, okay, 3 months ahead, I'm going to start figuring out what I can get ahead on that I don't have to put on anyone, and starting to get that work done ahead of time. So that was like what I first and foremost did. And like for me, I think the internal team thing was the main area that I was like, okay, I can get our whole team set up for 3 months without me by getting our calendar completely finalized.
Oh my gosh.
Before I leave. Like
that was probably the best thing that you did.
I like had all of our, like whenever there was a holiday, something off, like adjusting our schedules or like how it's going to shift that week. Like that was, I was gone over Cyber Week, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year, which is like the biggest time in what we do. And so figuring out, okay, these weeks we're not going to have client calls. So I'm going to move this to this week and canceling like all the things that we need to. Normally we kind of do that like on a 2-week ahead schedule. We plan, like if we have one call, we plan for the next week then, but I just did it for that whole 3 months. I was like, I'm just going to get this completely finalized so that when you guys show up that week, you're like, oh, this is already done. I already know what I need to do.
Which is exactly what happened. There were so many times Sanam and I would have meetings while you were out. We were like, oh, okay, like next week is Thanksgiving. We need to reschedule our call. And we go to our calendar and we're like, Lane, she already did it. Love her so much.
Yes. And that's just like, that's something I enjoy. So that for me, when I was like, all right, what can I get ahead on? I was like, ooh, this is gonna be fun. Like
and
I can do
like a high reward on both sides because those are things that Sanam and I really, really hate.
Yeah.
So to have you still like pull your lane weight in those areas and just do it in advance was like such a blessing.
Yeah. And I got way ahead when I did that. I was like, this is fun. I'm going to keep going. So I did like all of our holidays for all of 2024, like back last year. I was like, all right, let's just do it. Let's just get it all done. Obviously, don't kill yourself. Don't do things that like aren't realistic. Don't put, yourself in a position, especially during the end of your pregnancy where like you're stressfully trying to get literally like 3 months ahead of work done, but do what you can do, especially like the areas where like
do the things that only you can do.
Exactly.
So what advice would you give somebody who's maybe a solopreneur? I know that's really tricky in a really different situation. I'm not sure if this is something you've ever thought about, but is there anything just off the cuff that you think could maybe apply to that person as well?
I think you should really figure out like what is best case scenario? Like where am I willing to like sacrifice the work a little bit? Where am I like not? And figuring out like, okay, what is the healthiest balance that I can do? And finding out like also what your clients expect and where they're willing to give a little bit. If you've built good relationships with like people that you work with, I'm sure that they want to support you. So figuring out like, hey, I know we normally have weekly calls during my 3-month maternity leave. Is it okay if we do monthly calls? Obviously, if you're a solopreneur, you have to keep your business running. So if you still need to like check in on things every once in a while, but like you don't want to like have a regular work schedule, figure out like for a short-term perspective, how can I deliver the same thing and still give like the service you provide at way scaled back.
That's really good advice.
So that's where I would say like to start.
Kind of adjusting the expectations.
Yeah. So figuring out the things that you do, but you can't plan ahead. And you really do need to figure out like, all right, who's going to own that responsibility for me? So those main areas, I manage some people. I have some employees that work under me. So like I need someone to be their boss when I'm not there. I have one manager that works under me that I was like, okay, I need her to have someone to go to if she needs a mentor figure. And she felt comfortable being able to go to either you or Sanam based off of what it was.
So this is really like the delegation phase, you would say. So your experience was like delegating as a manager.
Yeah.
What about somebody who's delegating as somebody who's more on the executional side of things? Maybe in some instances that would be planned for you if you have a boss who's like overseeing the process, but do you have any tips to accomplish the same thing?
So I guess like asking who can, like, who first has the bandwidth, who has the experience where they can take it on. And I would say if you're asking someone to like really give more, like to work more, like do something nice for them. Like I'm sure people want to go out of their way to help, but like make them feel special in some way, shape or form, like go above and beyond for the people that are going to go above and beyond for you. And it's not always going to look the same in what that looks like, but just remember that either before you go or after you go, just like be thankful, be grateful, and like give back where you can. But yeah, so like the main areas, like managing a employee, then like billing, that's something that I do needs to still get done, but it needs to get done like once a month. So setting up, like for me, what I did is I was like, I had a list of exactly like, go here, link here, like send this, press this, here's the email that needs to be sent. So I like basically outlined exactly what I do. And it was like, just follow my step-by-step guide and it will get done. So I'm basically taking like any of the guesswork out of it, basically doing as much prep work as you can, and then allowing someone else to just go through the motions of getting it done.
That perfectly exemplifies the consideration that you were talking about, because it's different to be like, oh, will you do this thing? Like just go and do this. And it's a completely different thing to list it out step by step, take all the confusion out of the equation, because then when you're that person who's filling in, it's really easy to just like be the brain that does the thing versus having to figure out the thing that's unfamiliar to you is a completely different story.
And that's where it takes being very self-aware of like, okay, what of this responsibility, like, do I know that this person doesn't know? Because like a lot of times you might be like, oh, can you handle accounting? Can you handle billing? And just like, oh, they know how to do that. But like, you really have to think about when you're delegating your work to someone else, like, what do they actually know how to do and what do they not? And where are they going to struggle? Where are they going to have to, like, obviously we're really resourceful. Being resourceful is good, but you don't want to have to make someone be resourceful when they're covering for you.
Right.
So you want it
because
to
that could turn into them needing to reach out to you, which defeats the purpose.
Totally. And just like putting something on someone that like, if they're doing you a favor, like do them a favor, you know, get it in as good of condition as you can. And like, I think that just takes like thinking the way that they like putting yourself in their shoes and being like, well, if they don't do this, like what information, background, knowledge do they need to be able to get this done efficiently and effectively? And again, that is not something that is specific to an entrepreneur. That is someone for anyone that is taking time off, that is taking a maternity leave, no matter where you work, what type of industry you work in, someone's covering for you. So how can you set them up for success?
And I think that's something that I've always been really impressed with how we do things compared to my prior experiences. Like truly, like we had a team member who she spent a month in Thailand and we were like so happy for her. And her and I worked together really closely. And I was a little bit scared of her vacation, but it actually turned out completely fine because I think we're all just so courteous and respectful to each other that having somebody take a vacation isn't a burden on the rest of the team.
Yeah.
Always. And that goes beyond maternity leave. I think that just goes into like our work environment.
And having an actually fully staffed team that can support.
Oh my gosh,
like,
that's a huge point.
Yeah, because I think that like if you work for a company that they're overworking and underpaying their employees and they have someone doing way more than they can do, where if one person is out of office, the whole company goes to shit because like it just can't function without that person, then there's a problem.
Right.
And you need another employee or maybe multiple more employees.
Ladies, brace yourself for a skincare revelation. Revive has just launched their brand new brightening serum, and it is a total game changer. In the world of skincare, vitamin C is historically a tricky ingredient. Don't get me wrong, its brightening benefits and antioxidant properties are the gold standard. But it's difficult to stabilize, which is why you'll often find it alongside ingredients like ferulic acid, packaged in a dark tinted bottle, and with a fairly high price point. Revive has changed all of that. Powered by a new type of vitamin C, THD ascorbate, Revive's brightening serum is proven to penetrate the skin 50 times more effectively than the best vitamin C serums on the market. Revive is the only brand to pair the active with their patented biorenewal peptide, which focuses on plumping, regenerating, and hydrating the skin. So not only does it brighten, but it renews as well, which is why this product is clinically proven to visibly reduce fine lines, wrinkles, dark spots, and even out your skin tone in just 4 weeks. Plus, it's proven to immediately brighten the skin for an instant glow. It's not magic, it's science. Are you ready for a better way to brighten? Of course you are. Head to ReviveSkincare.com now and be one of the first to experience this groundbreaking serum. While you're there, use code Monday20 for an exclusive 20% off your purchase, including the brightening serum. Achieve your most radiant skin yet with Revive.
So we've talked about the planning.
Yes.
We've talked about the delegation. Talk to me about your actual maternity leave. Like, what was it like to take 3 months off of this business that you've been building for almost 6 years? And like, I feel like we didn't bug you with work stuff, but because we're friends, we were still in communication and work things would occasionally come up. So like, did you honestly feel like you were able to fully disconnect, unplug? Once you did that, were there things that surprised you about that experience? And just like, talk to me about what that was like. Obviously you were juggling a new baby. So like your life changed, but just like, tell me everything.
Yeah. So I would say that like everything with maternity leave and postpartum, I'm kind of grouping those together in one big topic, but like within that world, everything that I thought would be hard was easy, and everything that I thought would be easy was hard.
Okay.
And it's like I'm normally, again, I pride myself in being very self-aware and thinking like, oh, well, that I'm sure will be easy, like, and being wrong about it. It's kind of like throwing me for a loop. I'm like, how did I like misunderstand like how all of this would go?
No, typically Lane is always right.
But I will tell you that like anybody postpartum, after you go through that period, like everybody's kind of like, yeah, that's just how it goes. Like you can't expect to know how it's going to go. But from my maternity leave in particular. I would say that the first half of it, first 6 weeks or so, were incredible and perfect. And I was so disconnected and so present in my, like this new phase of my life. And it was like, I cherish those 6 weeks like so much. The next 6 weeks, I think I really got in my own head about getting back into work. And it was something I just did to myself. It was not a product of anybody else. And I think I just got so stressed about like, how am I going to take time and energy away from like what I'm doing right now? I had these 6 like blissful weeks. And then I was like, how is this going to change? Like, how am I going to work again? How am I going to still be a mom and feel the way that I feel right now? And I was just like so perplexed because I didn't feel like I had a plan. Like I didn't feel like, okay, I know how to like re-enter this world in the way that like feels right for me. And I just thought that I would be someone that was like, oh, I'm excited and ready to start working again and start using my brain in that way. Like I love to work. I love being creative and like thinking through, client strategies. Like it's fun for me. And so I think I was like really thrown for a loop by like the thought of that not being something that I was looking forward to, and also not being something that I like knew how to plan for.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that like I overall, like those last 6 weeks, I was just in my head a lot. Like I was still like super present and enjoyed like what I was doing. And it was still like obviously a great time. But you're not sleeping very much. And I was just like, I felt like I was on this, this time clock to like, oh, when my maternity leave is going to end. And like,
sounds like a lot of anticipation.
Yeah. It felt like I was just like living in like, oh, we're getting closer. And I was actually just talking to my sister about this because she's on maternity leave right now. And I told her, I was like, my one piece of advice is like, don't plan for what it's going to be like when you go back, because you don't know. And just like be present in what you're doing. Don't put too much energy and emotion on the after, because like, that's going to happen and you're going to figure it out, and it's going to get easier. It's going to be hard at first. It's going to get easier and you're going to figure it out. So just like have faith in that, because it will happen. But like, don't spend too much time like overly anticipating it in your head, because like that's my weakness. We were talking about our strengths and weaknesses early. I'd say that that's where my weakness is. And I think that was like a learning for me for sure.
And it's funny because it reminds me of kind of what you said about like going into like childbirth. Like I remember asking you being like, are you freaking out? Like, you can't undo this. Like, it's happening. Like, you're going to birth a baby. And you told me, you were like, Logan, like people have like given birth for like hundreds and hundreds of years. Like, it's why we exist, right? Like, so
eternity.
like, I know that my body can physically do this. And so I think a good reminder maybe to the lane at that point in time could have been, there are plenty of women out here who are rock star, badass mothers who also have inspiring careers. And there are plenty of women who juggle both and do so flawlessly. And so there's no reason that you couldn't as well.
Yeah. And I started going back to therapy like right at this point, postpartum. What I was trying to do is I was trying to control the future that couldn't be controlled yet because I wasn't there. I was like, I need to be here. And I was trying to like be here and there. And she's like, Lane, do you think that other people don't feel this way? This is something that any woman that goes through maternity leave and works and just brought a new life into the world deals with. Putting that in perspective, that like, this is not original. You're not original in feeling this way. Like, this is the norm. It gave me the ability to be like, okay, this is normal. But I would say that one like tactical thing that I would do in the future, because I did actually put together a transition plan before I gave birth. I was like, after 4 weeks, I will record an episode of the podcast every 2 weeks with you guys, just to make sure I can like still be involved in that way. After like 2 months, I'll potentially take on X, Y, and Z. So I gave myself some things to like, okay, if I'm ready to start transitioning, I wasn't ready to start transitioning. So I didn't do a lot of those things, but I tried to set myself up for success and like how I can ease back into it. When I did that, I kind of took things that I thought would be beneficial to you guys. And what I would do in the future is, instead of doing that, I would figure out what are the things that I can do mindlessly that take no energy, that are not hard, that just help me feel like I'm doing something. And I'd say that that's a really good tool to have. Like in this situation, me focusing on the things that are second nature is because like I'm transitioning. But like on a week to week basis, like some days you're like, I don't have the energy to do my like end all be all like best work right now. What are the things I can do today? Based off of like where I'm at, how I'm feeling, like, you know, you didn't sleep last night. I think that that's just like actually a good thing that I would encourage people to like learn about themselves and the work that they do and how that it can be applied to like different scenarios.
Kind of how you can be like mindlessly productive.
Yes, exactly. And like, what do those things like feel good to do when like you have really no energy to give, but you still need to get something done, you know? So just a tip.
Okay, so we've kind of covered your actual maternity leave, and you spoke a good bit about the anticipation of coming back, and you weren't totally itching for it. You weren't just like dying to start working again. You were really struggling with the balance of how do I expand my capacity so I can give just as much to being a mother, but still have something left to give to working as well. So we talked about your anticipation of returning to work, but what was it actually like when you did return? Was it as daunting as you thought? Was it easier than you thought? And how has it been since then?
So I would say that the anticipation was like way worse than it's actually been.
Isn't it always?
It always is. Like once I was like, all right, this is it. I'm ready to like jump back in. Obviously it's a new thing to figure out. It's a new adjustment. So it took, I'd say the first 2 weeks were a challenge. It was like, what works, what doesn't, when am I getting like super fatigued? When am I feeling like I'm drained and I don't have enough to give to like my family, or like I'm giving too much there and I can't give anything to work. It just like, I had to learn the motions and figure out like what felt right. The hardest part for me was like letting go of control of Evan's schedule and like letting someone else help me. I think that like I am a control freak, and I have worked very, very hard to get Evan on like a good schedule that works for him, that works for our family, and letting go of the control and letting someone else be in charge. Like it still like is hard for me, but I think it's totally normal to have anxiety around letting go of your baby and letting someone else step in. Like it's a hard thing to do. And like, it's not an easy task to just be like, oh yeah, you take care of my child. I've been the only person that's been like hands-on with him for his first 3 months. And now it's just like letting go and letting someone else like come in and help. Like that would be weird if that wasn't scary. So
for sure.
It's normal, and it's like, it gets better, it gets easier. And now I think I really look forward to my days where I'm like, okay, I have 4 or 5 hours out of the house that I can come to the office. I can run an errand if I need to. And I know that he's in good hands. He's at home, and like, there's someone else there that I know loves him and can care for him. And I think it like can help me be like even more present and happy when I am around him. So all about perspective. We're working on it still, but it's definitely getting easier.
Well, to give you a little bit of credit, you did let me hold him the first time I met him at like 2 weeks old. And I wasn't sure if you like what kind of mom you were going to be, because my mom loves to talk about that she wouldn't let anybody hold me for like 6 months.
Oh my gosh.
And
I was not like that. I was
no,
like,
you weren't.
I was like the people that I trust that wouldn't hold him if they had any reason why they shouldn't be. And they're washing their hands before they come over. I'm like, it's okay.
Yeah.
He's going to survive. Like he's fine.
Yeah. One thing that really stands out to me talking about when you came back to work, and this was really like our first like big leadership meeting post baby, we were kind of briefing you on the strategy for 2024 that we had been working on behind the scenes. You were like, of course, so overly thankful and gracious for like the time that you had taken off. And you literally told me and Sam, you were like, I mean, I've been like collecting a paycheck for the last 3 months that I feel like I didn't deserve, that like I earned it. And I just thought that was like such a crazy perspective, because I'm like, no, you built this business for yourself so that you could do what you just did. Like the time that you just took and you deserving that time, like that's the goal, right? So like, did that feel for you like a kind of full circle moment to be like, I can provide for my family at the same time that I'm physically not working?
Yeah, it didn't feel fair. I was like, I feel like something is not fair about that. Like I literally, like, I'm not kidding. Like every time that I would like get paid on the first of the month, I'd be like, this is not fair. I feel like I'm not doing my part. And what you're saying is so true. But I think that like goes to show just like how each of us like put the other person before ourselves. Like you're thinking about this from my perspective, like you built this business, you deserve this. And I'm thinking about it from your perspective. Like how can I take this paycheck when you're the one that's doing the work right now? So it's like all of us put each other before ourselves, which I think is why this functions the way that it does. But yes, it was like a very surreal moment. Like it didn't feel real and didn't feel like I like deserved it, even though I know that I did. But like I have to remind myself that I do.
I think when you start a business, there are two different routes. You can either be self-employed or you can start a business.
Yeah.
And the difference is when you're self-employed, you're your own master and you're not getting paid unless you produce an output, versus when you start a business, that business is operating whether you're there to tend to it or not. And so experiencing this with you kind of made me be like, wow, like this is why it's so important to really set up a system that can function with your life. Like this was a moment that was huge in your life and your business was set up to cater to that.
Yeah.
And I just like, when I think about it, I'm like, that's the dream. Like to collect a paycheck while you're at home snuggling your baby, a paycheck that you deserved because of all the legwork that you'd put into it. And I just like think it's so aspirational. And I think it's important to consider like on your entrepreneurial journey, like how can you set yourself up to function in that way? Because at the end of the day, you don't want to be a slave to your own business in the same way that you don't want to be a slave to somebody else's business. So do you think you would have felt that feeling of like feeling guilty collecting a paycheck if you were in a normal corporate job?
Oh my gosh, hell no. I would literally be like, I deserve this.
Thanks, suckers.
Yeah, like I more than anything deserve this. And I would probably feel like I deserve more. I deserve 5 months. I deserve 6 months.
Right.
Like I'm a slave to you and this is what you should do to repay me.
Well, because in those types of setting, it is part of your actual compensation package.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that like in, you know, you have a benefits package. And I think especially in like this day and age, when you do work for a corporate company, one of the big reasons you decide to go to one company versus the other and like what you consider when you're taking a job is like, what is their benefits package? What is their insurance package, their healthcare package, like PTO, maternity leave, like all of these different things. And I think that that is one of the like reasons why you work at a company like that is being able to like have access to those types of things, which to that extent, like, yes, I would be like 100% I deserve this and I'm going to milk it for all it's worth.
For sure.
And if you're listening to this and you're like, oh, my company, like it's a startup and they don't have a good maternity leave policy and it's so unfair. And like, I would want to get pregnant or I'm thinking about it. And I just, I'm like, I don't feel like I'm set up for success in that way. Tell them, ask them for a better one. My sister literally did that and she got her company to change their maternity leave policy. So I think she gets like 5 or 6 months now. And she was like, I think going to get 2 or 3, like maybe not even that. Like I feel like they might have like not even had a maternity leave policy and she like convinced them to give her 6 months. I know. So like.
So we're like all the other female coworkers just worshiping the ground she walks on now.
Yes. So put the power back in your hands and ask for what you want.
Yeah. And I think that goes back to the planning ahead piece because somebody who's in their early 20s, when they're accepting a job, you're looking at the salary, you're looking at the yearly PTO. You may not be thinking about those things. Like I couldn't tell you what the maternity leave policy was at any place that I've worked at. It's because it wasn't on my radar. But especially if you're somewhere where you're looking to build a career and you're looking to really climb the ladder where you're at, you want to make sure that it's set up for success for you to be able to do that sustainably. And if you don't have fair policies like maternity leave, that'll build resentment. And I think not contribute to your longevity at your company that you otherwise may have had a lot of longevity and success at if they had the proper policies.
Yeah. And to be completely fair, like we didn't have, for our employees that we've hired, like before this past year, we actually didn't have a set maternity leave policy. And that like was on us. We didn't realize that we didn't because no one had needed it yet. Now
but
we
to be
do.
Fair, if we had needed it, we would have come up with one.
But now then I needed one. So I was like, oh, I need to make one for our whole team. No one else at that point was like, I think, I don't even know if anyone else was married yet. Not that, you know, you can't have a baby outside of that, but I knew that no one else, like if we thought it was a thing that someone needed, we would have made one, but it just hadn't really crossed our mind until I needed one. But now we have another employee that's pregnant and she'll be on maternity leave this summer. And I'm so excited about that.
Yeah. And to that note, we've also added a marital leave policy, which I think I've talked about this before because I just think it's a good idea, but it was my idea.
It was your idea.
Because I feel like every time somebody gets married, it like eats up all of their PTO and it's like you are like a slave to your job for the rest of the year outside of that special time. And so we actually added more time off specifically for marital leave, which I think is so important. It's just as big of a life moment as having, well, maybe, I don't know. I can't compare because I'm not.
No, but it's huge.
It's a huge life moment.
At that point in your life, it is literally everything.
Yeah.
Like when you're going
through. It's the biggest moment in your life to date.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
a better way to say it.
And like, yeah, so I think we added 10 days off. So that like when you get married, you can take 2 weeks off without it eating into your PTO. Because most people want 2 weeks off for their wedding, like for their honeymoon, for the week leading up, like whatever it is. And like Logan said, a lot of companies, like you don't have that much else besides that to take off. So another thing you should ask your company for.
Okay, well, I feel like this was such an educational episode. Lane, thank you so much for sharing your experience and just being so gracious throughout the entire process. We love Evan to death. We couldn't imagine life without him. And we're so grateful that our business is structured in a way that was able to allow you to navigate this new chapter in your life so seamlessly. So before we go, I just want to ask, do you have any final notes or thoughts for the audience? Anything you want to leave them with as we close out this episode?
Okay, 2 other random tips that I would suggest for anybody that is considering taking a maternity leave soon. One being that I would definitely recommend starting your maternity leave a little early. I know we kind of brushed on this for a second, but giving yourself at least 1 week from like your due date or whatever, whenever you think you're going to go into labor, to like be able to really get your mind in the place that you want it to be leading into like such a big moment in your life. I think for me that was really important, and it really helped me like fully disconnect, be present, and like feel like I was going to go into giving birth and labor like on my own terms, and not like being stressed about like, oh, am I going to have to tell them that I, am not going to be there for this call because I was like going to go up until the last day of work. A lot of people will like have their maternity leave start as late as possible so that they get that more time at the end. But in my experience, for me, it was definitely helpful to have that week beforehand. So that's one thing that I would, one piece of advice that I would recommend. And then also like just in the transition back, when you are transitioning back into work, like don't put expectations on yourself about like how it has to feel. It is okay if work just feels like a job for a while. Like that's something that I've experienced right now is like normally work gives me so much like purpose in life and like things that I like look forward to. And right now, like transparently, sometimes it just feels like a job that I have to get through so I can go back to my family and like focus on my main priority. And that's been something that's been like a new weird adjustment and something that I've just had to like accept and be okay with. And just know like that is okay. That's not forever. But just meet yourself where you're at. Like you're going through so much, and it is okay for things to like feel different than you thought that they would feel.
I think that's beautiful.
Well, Logan, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share my journey and asking all the great questions that I wouldn't have even thought to talk about. You are so good at leading these interview style episodes, so I appreciate you.
Well, thank you, ma'am. I appreciate you.
If there's anything else that I didn't cover from postpartum, my journey, feel free to reach out, share any other questions that you guys have. I am so more than happy to be an open book and talk about these types of transitional life moments and things. I think that living through it, talking about it, and connecting with other people has been so helpful for me. So feel free to reach out if there's anything else you want to chat about. Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of Monday through Sunday. If you're building a career, a business, or any relationships, we know your time is valuable, so thank you for spending it with us.
With that in mind, we would be so grateful if you can spare 2 minutes to rate and review this podcast. Your reviews help spread the message to more people that work doesn't have to suck.
By the way, if you're looking for your community, join us on Instagram and TikTok at Monday Through Sunday Pod. We're all about connecting our like-minded listeners together. Let us know if there's anything you want us to talk about by sending us a DM. We'd love to hear from you.
Thank you again, and we'll talk to you on the next episode.